Hi, I'm James Roja, and today I'm going to be doing my UAI update video, and I'm going to be covering a few topics, including the level sequencer, rendering video, and using the movie render queue. So I'm going to start by just introducing the level sequencer and how to navigate and utilize that. So I'm just in the default third-person level. I did add the combat variant to this template file, and I've added a single pack from Fab, which is a free farm animals pack, which is it has some pre-made animations, which I'm going to take advantage of for parts of this video. So we're just going to go ahead and get into it. So to start this process, we'll just go ahead and make a new folder, and I'll call this level sequences. I find this is like a pretty useful thing to do at the start of this process because you're going to end up making some assets, and it's good to keep them organized. So inside this folder, I'll immediately go ahead and make a new level sequence. Now I'll just call this demo 1. And you can name this whatever you want, but just to keep it organized, I just went ahead and put LS at the front of that, which is kind of consistent with how they do materials and textures and the other naming conventions in Unreal. Once you've made the asset, though, you can just double click and open it. And this will create a timeline asset for you. Now, if you've ever used any animation software, you'll find this to be quite similar. But the main thing to be aware of is that this is going to be the list of all the stuff in the animation sequence or the level sequence, and this is going to be the timeline here. And I had mentioned that I brought in this farm animals pack. I'll just grab a cow, and this has pre-made animations already. And as an example, I'll just grab this walk animation, and I'll just drag and drop this in. Now, if I was to just leave this in the level and hit play, it will actually play the animation because these checkboxes are clicked and this is an animation asset. I can also preview that by just scrubbing through, but this will happen in place. So I'll actually just hit play. You'll see that, yes, the cow is animated, it even has its collision and everything, but it's walking in place. Now, this is probably fine for some kinds of assets, but the level sequence will be useful for all sorts of stuff, including gameplay purposes. And while most of the time I'm going to be using it for video, which is what I'm going to show really as the kind of focus of this demo, it can also be used to have animated parts of a level and kind of scripted sequences. So if I want, for example, this cow to walk in a straight line, the easiest way to do that would be to use a level sequence. And I know this is an animated asset. I could have the skeletal asset in the scene as well, but either way, it just needs to have the same skeletal mesh associated with it. But I can actually just drag and drop that asset from the browser or the outliner over here to my timeline. You'll see that it has been populated here, and we have some different tracks. So the key workflow of level sequences are tracks and keyframes. So here, this is the asset in question, and it doesn't currently have an animation associated with it. This one does in the level, but not in the level sequence. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is attach that animation. And anything that shares the same skeletal mesh will be able to access all of the animations associated with that skeletal mesh. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab the cow walking animation. Now if I hit play on this, it's going to also play through, and I can scrub through the timeline here. Now if I want this to continue though, because here you'll see it will stop as soon as this animation on the timeline is passed. So I can extend this actually by just dragging this out, and that will automatically loop that animation across the timeline, which is super handy. So now I can just hit play, and you'll see, voila, the cow is walking, but again, still in place. I haven't keyframed anything. All I've done is added the animation of the cow here to this level sequence. But now you'll see below that there is a transform option. And this has location, rotation, and scale. And if I just key this by hitting this button here, and I could do these specific properties individually if I want. I have now told it that at time 0, this is the position of the cow. I'm going to jump to the end, which is going to take me all the way here to the last frame of my timeline. And I'm going to move the cow, and I'm going to key it again. Now you'll see the cow will move from point A to point B over that amount of time. There's a couple of things that might be strange about this when you first try it. So first off, if we just jump, I'm actually just using down here at the bottom of the screen these jump commands to jump to the beginning and the end of the timeline, which I find is like a really handy way to navigate this workflow. So I usually will start here at frame 0, and I'll just hit play to watch that. You'll notice a couple of things. At the beginning and the end, the cow starts from 0 and kind of slowly speeds up. And so it's not actually moving very much here at the beginning. And then at the end, it will also slow down in place. So it kind of moonwalks for a second there. So to fix the moonwalking, since we have all of these keyed, we can actually just collapse this, and they're going to be considered as these little dots here. I can select those 2 dots, and I can right click. This is going to let me change how the animation is interpolated from point A to point B. If I do linear, for example, now it is going to be at a constant speed. So this seems about right. It's not too far off. I can see that the cow is sliding just a little bit. It's kind of subtle. So now I need to adjust the amount of time that the cow is taking to walk from point A to B to make it so that its feet aren't sliding at all on the ground. So I can just do that by actually just dragging this keyframe point. So now it's going to go from point A to point B in a less amount of time. So it's going to go faster actually. So that's going to make it slide even more. Which this actually happens to be a good place to showcase this. The timeline by default goes from frame 0 to frame 150 at 30 FPS. I can change that frame rate right here to any frame rate I want, which for gameplay purposes, of course, 60 FPS is generally the target. But I'm going to actually extend the timeline a bit, so I can actually do that by dragging this number at the bottom over and then sliding it out. This is just going to give me a bit more space. And then the start and end are these green and red bars on the timeline. So I can actually just move this in and out. So for example, if I want to extend my timeline here and extend my cow animation out and the keyframes, now the cow is going to take longer. So now the issue is actually, it seems like it's sliding a bit backwards. So at first it was at 150, and now I actually just extended it to 225. So let's make it like somewhere in the 180 range. Let's see that. That looks pretty close to me. The cow doesn't really seem to be sliding too much. It definitely is sliding a little bit though. And you'll see that the animation is going to be playing beyond the walking, which doesn't seem super comfortable. So let's see. That's pretty close. I can see it sliding just a little bit, but rather than spend some time adjusting that, we're just going to move on and carry on with it. Now, the viewport that I'm using right now is just a default viewport, but something that can be pretty handy is actually switching your viewport space to a cinematic viewport. Which is the setting right here. When you switch to a cinematic viewport, it's going to take you back to the origin point. And really it will look mostly the same, but you'll see a few more pieces of information here at the bottom of the viewport. Notably, you'll see these animation play controls, which can be pretty handy. Like before I was doing it down here at the bottom, but now it's been brought up into the viewport itself. Another thing that's really great is this is your timeline range, and this is the shot range. So I can actually just adjust this here, and you'll see it sliding that red downwards. So now this timeline, can still extend out, which is what you're seeing in this number, and then this is the play range right here in red. So now we have this animation playing. What I can do is save this, and we'll go back to our level sequence. And I can actually just drag and drop that level sequence in to the scene. Now, this cow, you'll see that some of the stuff has been overridden. And now if we hit play, nothing is happening. That's because the animation was overridden, and while I did put this level sequence into the scene, which is actually just like this kind of placeholder asset here, I haven't told it to play. So here I'm going to check this box for autoplay, and if I want it to loop, I can make it loop, which in this case I will just for demonstration, but obviously the cow will just kind of jump back to its starting point. But now when I hit play, I can watch the cow. This does have collision, and it will snap back. So, for your Frogger game or whatever, you could have your animals crossing the road. You could even ride this as like a moving platform, which is actually one of the great uses of this in gameplay purposes, is to program things like hazards or kind of movable platforming sections and whatnot. But that's really the basics of the level sequence, which is actually a really great starting point and segue into using them for video as well. So I just double click to reopen that asset, and like I said before, this is actually just the animation of the cow included in this level sequence. I'm going to make another level sequence now actually, and I'm going to call this camera demo. And what we're going to do now is basically do the same thing, but animate a camera inside of this sequence. So I'll double click and open this. And I need to add a camera to my scene. Typically for a video, I prefer to create cinema camera actors. You're welcome to create a camera actor, which is going to have different types of controls on it. Notably, it's going to let you control, here I'll show here, the field of view and the aspect ratio very directly. But the cinematic camera is going to have more controls similar to a real camera. To jump into that camera, so here I see the preview thumbnail. I'm going to go up here to the perspective tab and switch into the cinema camera actor. I'm going to go ahead and increase this focal length a bit. I find for cinematic shots going up to like 35 mm is about right. And I'm just going to kind of position the camera here to see our beautiful cow slowly walking. Now, if I hit play, you'll see that this animation is no longer playing because it's actually not the sequence that's loaded in. So I'm going to save this sequence, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that sequence into this sequence. So it's going to become a sub-level sequence. So and now all I did is I hit this add button, sub-sequence track, and I'm going to come here and I'm going to add that cow level sequence. And now when I hit play, that sequence is included inside this sequence. You'll see, importantly, that it also goes out to its initial frame range. So again, by default, I'm at 150, but it was going out to 180, which is the full length of that animation, even though my camera cut will stop here at 150. I'm going to go ahead now and add my cinema camera actor to this level sequence. This is a pretty important part of the workflow, really, is to make sure you keep assets discrete. So in general, I would keep a subsequence track for level animations or things that are going to be playing, probably another one for VFX or particle effects and Niagara stuff, and then another one for cameras. So you'll see that as soon as I drag my camera in, it populated a preview here. Now this is important because it is going to basically record out video for the frames that you see for this camera. What I'll show shortly is that this can be utilized for multiple cameras in the workflow if you want to have multiple shots and angles. But it's important because if, for example, I extended this out to 180, it would only record this camera out to here, leaving some dead footage here at the end. So you just have to make sure that you're going to extend your camera cut track to the end of that sequence as well. But you'll see that under the camera component, we again have a bunch of keyframeable properties. And so the easiest one to really get a handle on is going to be the movement, which again is the transform control. So let's say I want to have the camera slowly zooming in. So I'm going to key the camera at frame 0 here, and I'll jump to the end frame, and I'm going to have this very dramatic zoom in shot. Now there's a lot of movement in this camera, which we'll see here. So now the cow is moving and the camera is moving. And I don't really mind in this case that the camera has some acceleration and deceleration, where it kind of speeds up at the beginning and then slows down at the end. That actually kind of helps smooth this case out. But for forward pans, up and down pans, left, right pans, those kinds of simple camera moves, I generally would also switch this to linear, just like we did with the cow movement. But in this case, it actually works because I kind of moved the camera and swiveled it around. So the movement was more complex, and I think it helps to actually smooth it out quite a bit. But I noticed that the cow is quite blurry here. And this is a property called the focus distance. And by default, you can actually preview this here. I'm in the Cinema Camera Actors Details panel. And if I check this purple box, or this box above this purple, it will turn on the debug plane. I can't currently see it, and so I'm going to move it closer. But this purple plane that you can see as a preview is now showing what is going to be in focus in the camera. So for example, if I want the cow to be in focus, I can pull that frame here. Now, I can keyframe this. I can also turn on some look tracking settings if I want, and I could have the camera track to the cow, which in this case would work fine, but maybe I don't actually even need to do that because really I'm mostly concerned with like the beginning and the end, for example. But if I wanted to, I can have the camera track, for example, to the cow, and then even more specifically, I could have it track to a specific bone on the cow. But I'm actually just going to do it a little simpler than that for now. I'm going to key, which you can key in the timeline over here, or you can key in the details panel of different assets as well. So I'm going to key it by clicking this button, which you'll see has keyed the manual focus distance here. And now I'm going to flick to the end. I'll turn that plane back on and pull it closer in. And now I'll key it again here. So, and there I accidentally clicked this green bar, or this, and that actually snapped the beginning play range over there. So I'm going to snap it back by moving to frame 0 and setting it over here. But now if I hit play, you'll see that in the end, our cow is still in focus. We can play with some other things as part of this as well if we want. Focal length operates similar to like a zoom feature, and aperture is going to be basically the amount in frame that is going to be in focus. Specifically, the lower the aperture, the narrower the focus band will be. So if I, for example, really lower this down, the background is going to be blurrier, and the band of focus is going to be narrower as well. So I've actually narrowed it quite a bit here to 0.1, which is going to be quite low for Unreal. You may use that to make things look like miniature or very dramatic, kind of blur in and out settings. But in this case, we'll leave it on because I'm going to show some of the issues that can arise with this, but also I'm going to show how to make sure you can get that quality back out from this. So I'm going to save this sequence, and we actually do have a lot going on in this already. We have our camera movement and a subsequence track, which we can actually double click and open that and go back to our cow sequence. I'm going to add one more subsequence track. So I'm going to go ahead and make it fresh over here. And I'm going to animate one more property of this, which will hopefully be a nice comprehensive overview of the different ways that you can really leverage this. I'm going to put a directional light here, and what that will allow me to do now is control the directional light itself. This is an important example because you'll notice by default only the intensity and color are keyframeable as properties here. But in this case, I'm going to extend this out, and I want to animate the sun rotating as if the sun is setting rapidly, like some kind of dramatic time lapse or something. So by default, I don't actually see that property available. So what I need to do is I need to come up here and add the plus track and add a transform track. Now, when I open the transform track, I only want to key the rotation of the directional light. So I will key that at 0 here, and then I'll just use the transform controls over here to turn that into a sunset, and I'll key that secondary rotation. So now, if I hit play, you'll watch as the shadows extend and the sun sets in our scene. This scene already has the sky atmosphere, skylight, and all the components to make it so that the skybox and everything is dynamically updating with the sun position. And so we don't have to worry about the color or anything like that in this particular case. But I could also key things like the light's intensity, and I could make the light, for example, turn more orange as it sets if I needed to. But like I said, we already have that active because of all of the lighting components in the default scene. So I'm going to go back to our camera demo, and I'm going to actually also add another subsequence track with our lights. And now, when I hit play, all three of those things are going to be active: the camera movement, the cow, and the sun setting on the cow. So it's very dramatic cow shot here that we have. Let's say I'm happy with this. This is 179 frames or 180 frames here. It's at 30 FPS, which is about 6 seconds of footage. So I'm going to go ahead and demo a couple of ways to render that out. Now, obviously, the preview here is a pretty good way to edit and make tweaks in Engine. But if you need to export this for your workflow or other people you're working with as like a preview, you can use this render movie settings. Now, I would only do this for previewing. This, by default, is going to go ahead and produce a video file at 1280p, or 720p actually, and it's going to be slightly compressed. This video is going to be pretty rough, if you will. So we'll take a quick look at that. I'm just going to make a new folder here. And I'm going to go ahead and capture that movie. This will prompt me to save stuff I haven't saved yet, so yeah, I'm going to save all that good stuff. You'll see the preview of it getting rendered out. Now this video isn't terribly complex, so actually this preview may be okay. This will get way more iffy though as you go, and you'll see that there's a lot of issues with this footage now. It's going to have a lot of aliasing around the edges of the meshes. It's quite compressed and pixelated, even though it was full quality is my preview. And it feels a little bit laggy, like the bitrate isn't really playing at its full resolution. So again, this is really only for previews to export in this fashion. If you are still in a hurry and you need to export out video, I would still recommend actually doing it as an image sequence and compiling it. Now, there are several options here, and they're going to have different resolutions and everything associated with them. For high-end production, you're going to probably end up using EXR files. That's really the most data, the most efficient file to use. I find for stuff that I'm just doing alone or in my personal workflow, PNGs are nice because they're easier to preview, and so for rapid iteration, I prefer PNGs as kind of like a middle ground. And then you're going to find that JPEGs are going to be like the lowest quality option, but they'll still be okay for a lot of purposes. So I would say, in general, I find myself using PNGs, but EXRs are really good. Here, I've now picked PNG as my output type, which is basically going to export an image per frame. And so in this case, it'll be 180 images as the sequence, because that's how many frames are in the sequence track. Now, it's still at 720p, which for a preview is totally good, actually. So I'm actually going to leave it there, and you'll see that it's actually set to full quality. So I'm going to go, and I'm going to go back to that folder I just made, but I'm going to make a subfolder. And I'm just calling this shot 1 version 1 for myself. And I'm going to select that, and I'm going to hit capture. Now, it still showed me the video preview, but instead of compiling a video, it has now compiled a sequence of stills, which I would need to use Media Encoder or Premiere or something else to process those. But you'll notice each frame is going to have higher resolution, and so this is closer to the quality of the final that I would arrive at. I can still see in this frame, the still frame, some of the aliasing that I was mentioning before, but the quality is definitely better than the compressed AVI file. So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to show you how to get maximum quality stuff out as well. So the level sequences are really to do the animation itself of either cameras, lights, actors in the scene and whatnot. Any kind of movement, you'll use the sequencer to set that up. This is the render movie settings, which is really primarily for previews. And now to do production video or high quality video, we need to actually go to our plugins, and we'll turn on something called the movie render queue. This is a built-in plugin, but it's off by default. And I'm going to turn it on, and it's going to prompt me to restart the engine. So we're going to go ahead and do that. All right, so our engine is rebooted. We've got it all. Our sequences are still set up and actually still in our cinematic camera even. I'll go ahead and open up my demo shot here, and we'll just make sure that that is still working as intended, which, voila, just made sure everything got saved correctly. So now when I hit the render button, this pop-out has changed. If I go to this little ... I now can pick between the two modes of video rendering. The movie scene capture is the one that I had just shown previously, but this is the movie render queue, which may look intimidating. It's a little less user interface friendly, but it's not too bad really. So this is now loaded in that shot as our job. To change the settings on this, I need to click here. And this is going to allow us to have more control and squeeze more quality out of our video production. So first off, we just use this plus setting icon here to add stuff to this list. It's got JPEG rendering, deferred rendering, and output by default, which means it's going to export a JPEG image sequence. It's going to be using the deferred rendering, which is the viewport rendering, and it's going to be outputting at this resolution to this location. I'm going to add a PNG sequence here and turn off the JPEG sequence. And again, that's just like a personal preference of mine. I find JPEGs do compress a bit more. PNGs tend to hold more information, but if you want to hold the maximum information, you'll see that they even have the different bit rates you want an EXR sequence. But for my purposes, I'm just going to use a PNG sequence. There's several features here that I would really recommend considering to use whenever capturing video. Game overrides is a really handy one that is going to basically help you control the LOD pop-ins and things like foliage streaming. And so just by turning this on, it's basically going to disable some of the kind of gameplay efficiency features, which I would just recommend in general turning this on. It will also, you'll see, increase the shadow distance scale, which is going to basically give you better shadow resolution for farther into the distance in your scene. You can tweak these settings as necessary, but by default in this scene that I have here, which is quite constrained because of this back wall, we don't have to worry about too much other than just turning it on. Some other things that I would really recommend considering turning on, which I'll go into way more depth on, is the anti-aliasing and the console variables. But high resolution is specifically another mode that you can activate to tile a render. So if you're needing to like print a banner or something from an Unreal Engine scene and you need like a super high resolution image for print, you would use this high resolution modifier. But I'm not really going to go into that in this case. But the ones that I use the most typically are anti-aliasing and console variables. So I'll go over the anti-aliasing first. So by default, you probably have an anti-aliasing method turned on, which is probably TSR. And TSR isn't bad, but you'll find to get the most quality out of this, you actually want to use none and manually control the spatial sample count and the temporal sample count. Anti-aliasing is essentially a software algorithm. It's an algorithm that is going to be smoothing the jagged edges of meshes and geometry from a render. And so if you turn this on, it will help it be smoother. This is really essential when you have foliage in your renders. But in this case, I'm just going to set this to 2 and 8. These need to be in powers of 2, and so and they need to be like multiples of each other, which you'll see it if I type a wrong number in to some of these down here. It needs at least 8, and I think you may get other warnings if these aren't multiples. But I usually just do as like a baseline, like 2 and 8. But if you really want to squeeze resolution out, you can go to 8 and 16, 8 and 32, etc. But I'll just use 2 and 8 for this. I would also recommend turning on render warm-up frames. Now, what that will be is if you look at the first couple of frames, not everything has loaded in actually, and you'll see that the lights change quite drastically there in the first few frames. Rendering the warm-up frames will help alleviate that issue. So we'll turn on that as well. And now we're going to get into the one that some people might think is a little more intimidating, is the console variables. Now, this one is probably open-ended, and if you go into Unreal forums and all sorts of stuff, you'll find a bunch of documentation around console variables for the movie render queue. And for example, this is a forum from 2023 where this user has listed all of their favorites, which you can just copy these directly into this console variables list if you want. These are straight from Unreal documentation. I just find that for example, this post is a really great collection of those values and stuff. But the one that I'm really going to be mostly using for ours, because we do have a lot of focal blur, is the depth of field quality. And how that will work is we just go here to the console variables list, and we can hit plus. I'll say r.depth. You'll see as soon as I've typed it in, now the list is populating some of them. And if I mouse over it, you'll see what the different numbers are going to mean. So if I hit 0 next to it, it'll be off, 1 is low. We're going to go ahead and go for 4, which is extremely high quality. So I'll do depth of field quality, and I'll type 4. And you can add as many of those as you want. So just as another example here, another one I find I like quite a lot is the tone mapper quality. So we'll add that in here. And if you mouse over it again, you'll see the preview numbers, and I'll just put 5. You can, like I said, add a bunch of these, but I find that if you have any sort of focal blur, depth of field quality is pretty essential. The final thing will be just picking our save location, which I'll make a new folder. And I'll make this 30 FPS to match our output from this. I'll hit accept. Now that job has been loaded into the queue. I could save configs and queues along the way if I want to reuse some of the settings in the future. But in this case, because it's kind of a one-off, I'm just going to hit render locally. So now it's going to compile, it's going to render some warm-up frames, and then it's going to essentially, now where I set up the anti-aliasing is it is multi-rendering each frame of the operation, and it's rapidly doing that and compositing them for a smoother result. But this one isn't taking too long. This is also 1080p versus 720p, which is going to help as well. In the preview, it looks like it's jumping, but it's not actually going to look like that when we play it back. Now, while that's loading, I will open up Media Encoder, where I'm going to compile these videos. It's a very dramatic cow shot here. Okay, Media Encoder is opening as my video is finishing up. And you can use any encoding software. I mean, you can take this directly into After Effects or Premiere or DaVinci or really anything. Media Encoder is just kind of the quickest and easiest way to do this. Directly from image sequences to video though. So this isn't really a tutorial for Media Encoder, but I'm just going to go ahead and grab that footage. And I'll go ahead and compile both of these. So here I just select actually this first image in the sequence, and it automatically will open that. And I'll click on the settings and we'll go through and look at that. I'm going to change this name to Shot1 V1, max render quality, max depth. Okay. I'm going to also add my second one, which is, again, you just click the first frame, grab the sequence, and I'll go ahead and do those same settings. Now, the one unfair advantage of this is I did render this at 1080p, which it will look better from that, but only mildly so. And we'll say OK. So I hit play. This will actually just go ahead and compile both of those pretty quickly. So we can watch now the first one. Not too bad. much smoother than the AVI. So actually I'll pull up that one for the comparison. So this was the AVI. It's pretty choppy. It's pretty low bit rate and kind of jagged edges on everything. Here is the 720p movie render, and here is the 1080p movie render queue, which on my end is definitely higher quality. This first frame is definitely a little questionable, which I could edit that out for sure. But just going on a frame by frame basis, it's definitely, well, that actually does look a little bit blurry, but I think as the video goes, it has some motion blur in it. But yeah, those are the three main output modes from video, and I would say that they're all useful for different purposes as you go. But of course, beyond that, you can just use the level sequences for animation in your levels to animate actors, lights, cameras, etc., which is a super handy way to activate your levels and make them more alive. But thanks for watching.